My parents handed my sister a $13,000 luxury cruise and gave me a crumpled $2 lottery ticket in front of 30 relatives. Then they laughed. I still remember the sound of it. Not loud, worse. Polite family laughter, the kind designed to humiliate you while pretending it's harmless. "This is what suits your situation, Audrey." My mother smiled while saying it, like she was being generous. Marcus smirked from across the dining room. Vivian giggled behind her wine glass. My father stared at me with that familiar expression that said, "Don't make this awkward." Funny thing is, that little lottery ticket ended up winning $100 million. But honestly, that wasn't even the part that destroyed my family. The real destruction started later that night when I found documents proving my parents had secretly used my grandmother's house as collateral for a massive debt. And the man everyone trusted most, my brother-in-law Marcus, was at the center of all of it. But before I tell you how one Thanksgiving dinner exposed years of favoritism, fraud, and betrayal, comment below. If your family humiliated you publicly your entire life, would you forgive them after suddenly becoming successful? And if you enjoy emotional family drama stories, betrayal, manipulation, and satisfying endings, subscribe now because this story gets intense. My name is Audrey Crawford. I was 32 years old, and Thanksgiving at my parents' house always felt less like a holiday and more like an audition I kept failing. Everyone in the Crawford family had an assigned role. My older sister Vivian was perfection, beautiful, elegant, admired, the kind of woman people complimented before she even spoke. My mother adored her openly. Dad treated her marriage like a business investment that finally paid off. Meanwhile, I became the practical daughter. Interesting title, because practical is what families call daughters they don't consider special enough to celebrate. I was a landscape architect. I designed rooftop gardens, luxury courtyards, outdoor spaces for corporate buildings. But according to my mother, you do something with plants. That sentence irritated me more than I ever admitted out loud. Years of education, professional awards, successful clients, reduced to gardening whenever relatives visited. That Thanksgiving, I arrived carrying homemade autumn salad and burgundy dahlias I'd spent 3 months growing myself. My mother opened the front door, her eyes immediately dropped to the flowers. "Oh, still playing with plants." No hello, no hug. Then suddenly her entire face transformed, because Vivian walked up behind me. "There's my girl," she rushed past me instantly. Vivian laughed dramatically while showing off some designer coat Marcus bought her. Marcus Pierce, my brother-in-law, real estate consultant, perfect smile, expensive watches. Carefully rehearsed charm. Men like Marcus survive because people mistake confidence for integrity. Dad sat in his leather recliner already listening to Marcus explain some investment opportunity. Nobody noticed when I walked into the room, but Dad finally glanced over and said, "Audrey, good, you can help set the table." Of course, Vivian arrived as honored guest. I arrived as unpaid labor. 30 relatives filled the house. Wine glasses clinking, football playing softly, everyone orbiting around Vivian and Marcus like they were celebrities. Meanwhile, I folded napkins alone in the dining room. Then came the moment I should have realized something bigger was wrong. I walked toward the kitchen carrying a water pitcher when I heard my parents whispering with Vivian. "The cruise leaves December 15th, Mom said excitedly. 2 weeks in the Caribbean." I froze. Cruise? Nobody mentioned a cruise. "What about Audrey?" Vivian asked casually. Silence. That silence told me everything before Dad even spoke. "She's busy with work," he finally said, "and trips like this are expensive." Interesting, nobody asked if I was busy. Nobody asked if I could afford it. They simply decided I wasn't important enough to include. I pushed the kitchen door open slowly. "I'm not invited." 3 guilty faces turned toward me. Mom recovered first. "Oh, sweetheart, this trip is really for family." Family? That word always sounded strange coming from people who treated me like an outsider. "It's to celebrate Marcus's promotion," Vivian added quickly. "We didn't think you'd be interested." Translation, we didn't think you mattered enough to bring. Before I could answer, I noticed movement in the hallway. Grandma Grace stood beside her walker watching all of us silently. And honestly, she was the only person in that house who ever truly saw me. Her eyes met mine for one long second. Sharp, knowing, then softly she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Call Thomas Smith this week." I frowned immediately. Who? But before she could answer, Mom rushed forward. Okay, Mom, let's get you sitting down. And just like that, Grandma disappeared down the hallway, but not before looking back at me one final time. Like she was trying to warn me about something. At the time, I had no idea how much that warning was about to change my life. Dinner started exactly at 6:30. Because my mother believed appearances mattered more when they happened on schedule. Everything about the Crawford family looked perfect from the outside. Crystal glasses, candles, designer serving dishes, carefully staged laughter. Funny how toxic families usually look the healthiest in photographs. I sat halfway down the table between Aunt Marlene and a cousin whose name I honestly forgot 3 separate times that evening. Meanwhile, Vivian sat beside my parents at the center like royalty. Marcus controlled the room effortlessly, every story louder than necessary, every joke perfectly timed, every compliment calculated. And honestly, that man unsettled me from the beginning, not because he was rude, because he was too polished. People hiding something usually are. Halfway through dinner, Dad stood and tapped his wine glass with a fork. The room quieted immediately. That moment felt staged somehow, like everyone except me already knew what was coming. Family is everything, Dad announced proudly. 30 relatives nodded. Interesting. People say family is everything most aggressively right before doing something cruel. Mom stood beside him smiling brightly. This year, she said, we wanted to do something special for our daughters. Daughters, plural. I almost laughed at the word. Then Dad turned dramatically toward Vivian. Vivian, sweetheart, come here. Vivian practically floated toward them. Mom handed her a thick cream-colored envelope tied with gold ribbon. The room buzzed instantly. Oh my God, no way, that's amazing. Vivian opened it slowly for maximum effect, then screamed. A Caribbean cruise, applause exploded across the dining room. 14 days, luxury suite. Private excursions, first class. I knew exactly how expensive it was because I accidentally saw the itinerary weeks earlier on Mom's laptop. $13,000. My parents never helped pay my college loans. But somehow there was always money for Vivian. Then Mom turned toward me, and the entire energy of the room changed. The applause faded. People suddenly looked uncomfortable. Deep down, everyone sensed humiliation was coming. Audrey, honey, come here. I stood slowly. My legs felt stiff, my face burned. Mom handed me a tiny white envelope, thin, too thin. Inside was a single crumpled lottery ticket, Mega Millions, $2. For 1 second, I genuinely thought it was supposed to be a joke. Then Mom smiled sweetly and said, "This feels more appropriate for your situation." The room erupted laughing. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make my chest feel hollow. Marcus leaned back smirking. Luck's a long shot when you don't have brains backing it up. More laughter. Vivian covered her mouth, giggling. Maybe she'll win $5. That moment changed something inside me permanently, because humiliation in private hurts. But humiliation in front of 30 witnesses, that reshapes you. I stared down at the ticket quietly. My entire body burned. People think breaking points feel explosive. Sometimes they feel cold instead, like a door quietly locking forever inside your chest. Then suddenly another voice cut through the room. This is cruel. Silence. Complete silence. Everyone turned. Grandma Grace stood beside her walker trembling with anger, and honestly, I had never seen her look more powerful. You should be ashamed, she said directly to my parents. Both of you. Dad's jaw tightened immediately. Mother, no. Her voice cracked sharply through the room. You will not treat Audrey this way. I nearly cried right there, not because she defended me, because she was the only person who did. Mom rushed toward Grandma immediately. Okay, Mom, let's get you resting. I am not tired. The doctor said, I know what the doctor said, Patricia. For the first time all night, my mother looked nervous. Like Grandma might accidentally reveal too much. Before disappearing down the hallway, Grandma looked directly at me again. Then her eyes shifted subtly toward her old leather handbag sitting near the window. The bag she never let anyone touch. I frowned immediately. What was she trying to tell me? The moment she disappeared, the room exhaled. Conversation resumed awkwardly. People avoided eye contact. Nobody apologized. Of course not. Families like mine survive by pretending ugly moments never happened. Marcus raised his wine glass casually. To good fortune? Everyone drank. I didn't. I sat staring at the crumpled lottery ticket in my hand while something sharp unfolded slowly inside my chest. Because suddenly I understood the truth. The ticket wasn't random. It was symbolic. $2, that's what my family believed I was worth. I kept the lottery ticket, not because I believed I'd win. Because throwing it away felt too symbolic somehow. That tiny crumpled piece of paper carried 32 years of family rejection inside it. I slipped it into my coat pocket while everyone else laughed and passed around cruise brochures. Funny thing about families like mine, they never notice the exact moment someone emotionally checks out. The rest of Thanksgiving unfolded exactly the way Crawford family gatherings always did. Vivian performed happiness. Mom performed perfection, Dad performed authority, and Marcus performed success. That man loved audiences. Every conversation somehow circled back to his investments. Real estate, consulting, private lending. The kind of vague wealthy guy language people automatically trust when someone wears a Rolex. But something about him always felt wrong to me. Too smooth, too careful, like he studied people before speaking to them. Later that night, I cleaned the kitchen alone while everyone else relaxed in the living room drinking expensive whiskey. Of course, Vivian never cleaned after holidays. Golden daughters don't scrub casserole dishes. I was rinsing plates when Aunt Marlene quietly approached beside me. "You okay, honey?" Interesting question, because people only ask that when they already know the answer. I forced a smile. "I'm fine." She looked toward the living room carefully before lowering her voice. "No, you're not." That nearly broke me more than the humiliation itself, because kindness after cruelty feels unbearable sometimes. Aunt Marlene leaned closer. "Your grandmother's worried about you." I frowned immediately. "She told me to call someone named Thomas Smith." Aunt Marlene's expression changed instantly. Fear, real fear. "You need to make that call," she whispered quickly. "Why?" But before she could answer, Dad shouted from the living room. "Marlene, you coming?" Her face tightened immediately. "Just trust your grandmother." Then she walked away. That was the second time someone acted nervous around me that night. Something bigger was happening inside my family. I just didn't know what yet. Around midnight, most relatives finally left. Vivian and Marcus stayed behind drinking with my parents. I cleaned the dining room alone. Again, looking back now, the signs were everywhere. Who serves? Who relaxes? Who gets celebrated? Who gets used? Families reveal themselves in patterns long before betrayals become obvious. I carried a stack of dishes past Dad's office when I noticed the door slightly open. Light still on. Interesting, Dad never left paperwork exposed. Ever. Curiosity pulled me inside. And honestly, that decision changed my life more than the lottery ever did. Papers covered his desk, bills, collection notices, past due warnings. My stomach tightened immediately. Dad owned an auto repair business for 30 years. Successful, stable, at least that's what everyone believed. Then I saw Marcus's name. Loan agreement, $180,000. Co-signed by Marcus Pierce. My pulse started hammering instantly. The interest rate made me physically sick, predatory, brutal, the kind of loan desperate people take when they're already drowning. My hands shook while flipping to the next page. Then suddenly I stopped breathing completely. Collateral agreement. Grandma Grace's house. Her signature sat at the bottom, shaky, uneven, wrong, I knew immediately. 6 months earlier, Grandma fell and spent 2 weeks hospitalized on heavy pain medication. They made her sign while medicated. The realization hit me so hard I nearly dropped the papers. Suddenly everything made sense. The tension, the secrecy, Grandma warning me, Marcus constantly around my father. This wasn't favoritism anymore. This was desperation. I pulled out my phone instantly. And for the first time in my life, I stopped behaving like the obedient, invisible daughter. I photographed everything, every page, every signature, every overdue notice. My heartbeat thundered so loudly I barely heard footsteps outside the office. I shoved the papers back together seconds before Mom walked past the doorway. "Audrey, what are you doing?" I forced calm into my voice immediately. "Putting away dishes?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. Interesting, my mother always sensed when people stopped playing their assigned role. "Well, hurry up," she snapped softly. "We're tired." Of course, I walked out carrying dishes with shaking hands. But inside, something had changed permanently, because suddenly I understood the truth. The humiliation, the exclusion, the $2 lottery ticket. None of it was accidental. They needed me small, dismissed, ignored, undervalued. Because people who underestimate you rarely notice when you start uncovering their secrets. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grandma Grace's shaky signature on those loan papers. A woman barely able to walk, drugged on pain medication, used as collateral by her own family. Some betrayals permanently change the way you see people. I sat at my kitchen counter until nearly 3 a.m. staring at the crumpled lottery ticket beside my laptop. $2, that's what my parents publicly assigned to my worth while secretly risking Grandma's entire house behind closed doors. The irony almost made me laugh. Around midnight, I finally searched the lottery numbers. Not seriously, just as a distraction. I still remember the exact sound my heartbeat made after the third number matched. Slow at first, then violent. First number, second, third, fourth, I stopped breathing. By the fifth number, my hands physically started shaking. No way, I refreshed the page immediately. Same numbers. Mega Millions jackpot, $100 million. People imagine lottery winners screaming. I didn't. I sat perfectly still for almost 10 minutes staring at the screen like my brain refused to process reality. Because honestly, the money wasn't even the first thing I felt. Freedom was, not luxury, not revenge, freedom. Then suddenly, I remembered Grandma Grace whispering, "Call Thomas Smith." That moment still gives me chills. I grabbed my phone immediately. The next morning, Thomas Smith's office smelled like old books and polished wood. He looked exactly like a trustworthy attorney should. Silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, calm eyes, the kind of man who still believed integrity mattered. "You spoke with my grandmother?" I asked carefully. Thomas nodded. "She was hoping you'd come." Interesting, not IF, when, like Grandma already knew I would eventually discover something. I sat down slowly. "There are some matters involving your grandmother's estate," Thomas said carefully. But first, his eyes shifted toward the lottery ticket in my hand. "You've won something?" Even hearing someone else say it sounded unreal. $100 million. Thomas slowly removed his glasses after that. Long silence. Then finally, "Well, that changes certain timelines." "Timelines?" I frowned immediately. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, Thomas slid a thick folder across the desk toward me. 10 years ago, he said softly, your grandmother established a private trust fund in your name. I froze. What? $500,000? The room tilted. I genuinely thought I misheard him. Grandma left me money? Thomas nodded. She wanted it hidden until she believed you were emotionally safe from your family. Emotionally safe. Not financially safe. Emotionally, because Grandma understood something nobody else did. The Crawford family didn't just use money to control people. They used approval. Thomas folded his hands carefully. Your grandmother always worried your parents would try taking it from you. That sentence hurt more than expected. Because Grandma spent years quietly protecting me while everyone else minimized me. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Legal documents, account statements, trust paperwork, real, all real. Then Thomas slid another folder beside it, Grandma's house documents. The deed transfer happened the day after her hospitalization, he explained quietly. She was heavily medicated. Can we fight it? His expression sharpened immediately. With resources, absolutely. Resources. Interesting word now that I suddenly had millions. Thomas leaned forward carefully. Your father owes Marcus Pierce $180,000. If he defaults, Marcus gets your grandmother's house. The pieces clicked together instantly. Marcus wasn't helping my father, he was trapping him. The cruise, the fake wealth, the financial pressure, everything suddenly smelled like desperation disguised as success. I looked down at the paperwork silently, then quietly asked, what are my options? Thomas answered immediately. We challenge the deed. We protect your grandmother. And we do it carefully. For the first time in my entire life, I felt powerful, not because of the lottery. Because finally, I had truth. And honestly, truth terrifies manipulative families more than money ever will. I didn't tell anyone about the lottery, not my parents, not Vivian, not even Aunt Marlene. For 3 days, I walked through my life carrying a $100 million secret while pretending everything was normal. And honestly, That silence felt powerful. For the first time in my entire life, my family didn't control the most important thing about me. I still went to work, still answered emails, still met clients about rooftop gardens and luxury courtyards. Meanwhile, inside my purse sat a lottery ticket worth more money than anyone in the Crawford family had ever imagined. Funny thing is, the money itself wasn't consuming me. The truth was, Grandma's house, Dad's debt, Marcus's involvement. That's what kept replaying inside my head, because suddenly I understood something devastating. The favoritism in my family wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Vivian was easy to manipulate because she needed approval. I was dangerous because I noticed things. That's why they minimized me constantly. Not because I lacked value, because they needed me doubting my own instincts. On the fourth day, I met Aunt Marlene at a coffee shop on Elm Street. She looked exhausted, like someone carrying guilt too heavy for too long. The moment she sat down, she whispered, "You found the documents, didn't you?" I stared at her carefully. "You knew." Tears filled her eyes instantly. "Not everything, but enough." Interesting. Families always have one person who sees the truth and stays quiet to survive. Aunt Marlene wrapped trembling hands around her coffee cup. "Marcus isn't a consultant," she whispered. "Not really. What does that mean?" "He lends money to desperate people." That answer chilled me immediately. Predatory lending. The massive interest rate suddenly made perfect sense. "There's more," she added quietly. Then she pulled out her phone. Text messages filled the screen. Explicit, romantic, damning between Marcus and another woman. My stomach dropped immediately. "Who is Diana?" "His assistant." 8 months. They'd been having an affair for 8 months. One message read, "Once the house deal closes, I'm leaving Vivian." Another, "She served her purpose." I stared at the screen in complete silence. Marcus wasn't just manipulating my father. He was using my entire family. And honestly, for the first time, I stopped seeing Vivian as the villain, because suddenly she looked more like another victim, just one too blind to realize it yet. Aunt Marlene's voice cracked softly. "I should have told someone sooner." "You were scared," I answered quietly. She nodded immediately. "Marcus isn't someone people cross." Interesting, fear explained so much about my family suddenly, why everyone protected him, why Dad kept defending him, why Mom treated him like royalty. Marcus didn't join the family because he loved Vivian. He joined because the Crawfords were easy to exploit. I left the coffee shop emotionally numb, then drove directly to the nursing home. Grandma Grace looked smaller somehow, frail, tired, but the second she saw me, her eyes sharpened immediately. "You called Thomas." Not a question. I sat beside her bed slowly. "I know about the trust." Grandma smiled faintly. "Good. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your mother would have taken it." The answer came instantly, no hesitation, like Grandma had known exactly who her daughter truly was for years. Tears burned behind my eyes, then quietly I told her everything. The lottery, the documents, Marcus, the affair. Grandma listened silently the entire time. When I finally finished, she laughed softly, not shocked, not surprised. "Just tired. Karma moves slowly," she whispered. "But it always arrives." Then she reached for my hand. "Promise me something, Audrey, anything. Don't let money turn you cruel like them." That sentence hit harder than expected. Because honestly, part of me already wanted revenge, public humiliation, exposure, consequences. I wanted them to feel what they made me feel for years, but Grandma squeezed my hand gently. "Protect yourself," she whispered. "Protect the truth, not your anger." I nodded slowly, and for the first time since Thanksgiving, I understood exactly what I needed to do. Not revenge, revelation. Because the most devastating thing about truth is that it destroys people without you needing to scream at all. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, the Crawford family gathered again, this time for a bon voyage dinner before the cruise. And once again, I wasn't invited as family. I was invited as help. "Audrey, can you arrange the centerpieces?" "Audrey, can you help the caterer?" "Audrey, make sure Grandma's nurse has the updated schedule." Interesting, the invisible daughter always becomes useful during labor. I did everything calmly. Smiling, quiet, helpful, exactly who they expected me to be. Meanwhile, not one person in that house knew I was already working with lawyers. Not one person knew the lottery winnings were being claimed anonymously through an LLC. And definitely not one person knew I was about to become richer than everyone in that dining room combined. The dinner itself felt like a celebration of arrogance. Marcus controlled the conversation as usual, snorkeling excursions, private dining, luxury suites, exclusive island packages. Vivian practically glowed every time he touched her hand, and honestly, watching her made me sad now because she still believed she was loved. Dad clapped Marcus on the shoulder proudly. "Best thing that ever happened to this family," Marcus smiled, but this time I noticed something different. His eyes never softened when he looked at Vivian, not once. Everything about him felt transactional, calculated, like he was already planning his exit. Then Marcus turned toward me with that familiar smirk. "So Audrey, buy any more lottery tickets lately?" The table laughed. Again. Funny how people repeat the same joke when they think someone will always stay beneath them. I smiled calmly. "You never know," I answered softly. "Luck surprises people sometimes." Mom raised her wine glass. "To family, to fortune." "To the Crawfords?" Everyone drank. I lifted my water glass instead, because deep down I already knew this would be the last peaceful dinner the Crawford family ever had. 12 days, that's how long until everything collapsed. The morning they left for the cruise, Mom actually sounded offended when I said I wasn't coming to the port. "Always working," she sighed dramatically. "You really should make more time for family." Interesting. People who emotionally neglect you always demand loyalty anyway. The second their car pulled out of the driveway, I drove straight to Thomas Smith's office. Paperwork covered the conference table. Lottery claim forms, trust documents, legal filings challenging Grandma's deed transfer. My new life sitting in neat little stacks. Thomas adjusted his glasses carefully. "After taxes," he explained, "you'll retain approximately $62 million. $62 million. And honestly, the number still didn't feel real, not compared to what mattered most, Grandma's house. "Can we protect her completely?" I asked quietly. Thomas nodded immediately. "Yes." Then he paused. "But Audrey, once we file these challenges, your family will know." I looked out the office window silently. Somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, my parents were drinking champagne on a luxury cruise while believing they still controlled the narrative. "No," I said softly, "they'll know the truth." Then suddenly my phone buzzed. "Vivian," I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Her voice sounded tense immediately. "Audrey, Dad's credit card got declined at the port." Interesting. So the financial collapse had already started. "We just need $500 transferred quickly," she continued nervously. "I'll pay you back." The irony nearly made me laugh. 32 years of being treated like the disposable daughter, and suddenly they needed money from me. I kept my voice calm. "I don't have $500 to spare right now." Silence, then, "Oh, okay. Never mind." Her tone changed instantly, cold again, like usefulness determined kindness in my family. The call ended. Thomas looked at me carefully. "You knew," I nodded slowly. "The debt's catching up, and honestly, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel panic watching my family lose control. I felt clarity. Because everything happening now was the natural consequence of years of manipulation finally collapsing under its own weight. The cruise ended 3 days early, not because of weather, because Marcus disappeared. Completely. One moment he was drinking champagne beside Vivian on the ship's upper deck. The next he was gone, no goodbye, no explanation, no luggage. Just vanished, and honestly, the chaos started before the ship even docked. Vivian called me crying at 4:12 a.m., not elegant crying. Panic, real panic. "Audrey, Marcus is gone." I sat upright in bed instantly. "What do you mean gone? He left." Her breathing became uneven. "The hotel manager said he checked out in Nassau yesterday with another woman." Another woman, interesting. Even after everything Aunt Marlene showed me, hearing it out loud still felt unreal. Then Vivian whispered the sentence that shattered the illusion completely. "He emptied our accounts." Silence, pure silence. Because suddenly every single thing I suspected became real at once. Marcus didn't love Vivian, he used her. Used my father, used the family name, used Grandma's house. And now he disappeared with everything he could take. By noon, the entire Crawford family exploded emotionally. Mom called me 6 times, Dad texted nonstop. Vivian sobbed through voice messages. Funny how quickly invisible daughters become important during disasters. I drove to my parents' house that evening, not because they deserved support, because I needed to see the truth unfold in person. The house looked different somehow. Smaller. The illusion of perfection was gone. Dad sat in the living room staring at paperwork spread across the coffee table. Bank notices, frozen accounts, debt letters. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in days. Then I saw Vivian, and honestly, for the first time in my life, she looked human. No designer confidence, no superiority, just devastation. Mascara streaked down her face, hands trembling, wedding rings still on. Interesting. Pain strips performance away from people fast. The second Dad saw me, his expression hardened immediately. Audrey, he snapped, did you know about this? Not are you okay, not can you help your sister, straight to blame. Classic Crawford behavior. I stayed calm. I knew Marcus wasn't trustworthy. Mom stood abruptly. You should have warned us. That sentence almost made me laugh. Warn them, the same people who mocked me publicly 2 weeks earlier. The same people who treated every concern I ever raised like jealousy. Interesting how ignored people suddenly become responsible for everyone else's mistakes. Vivian started crying harder. He took everything, she whispered. All our savings? Dad slammed paperwork against the table. And now the bank wants payment immediately. There it was, the real panic, not heartbreak, money. I looked at the papers carefully, then quietly asked. How much? Dad hesitated. 380,000. The room fell silent afterward, because everybody knew they couldn't cover it. Not anymore. The business was failing. Credit lines were frozen. Marcus vanished. And Grandma's house still sat tied to the debt. Mom looked at me desperately. Audrey, we need help. Interesting, not one apology first, need before accountability. Always. I looked around the room slowly, at the family portraits, at the expensive furniture, at the people who spent years treating me like background noise. Then finally, Dad said the sentence that changed everything. If we lose the house, your grandmother loses everything. That hit hard. Because unlike them, Grandma actually mattered to me. I pulled out my phone slowly, then placed it on the coffee table. Dad frowned immediately. What's this? Evidence? Silence. I opened the photographs from Dad's office. Loan agreements. Forged-looking signatures, predatory interest terms. Mom's face drained instantly. You went through my office? I uncovered fraud, I answered calmly. Dad looked furious. But underneath the anger, I saw fear, real fear. Then I opened the text screenshots Aunt Marlene gave me. Marcus and Diana, affair messages, financial manipulation, plans to leave Vivian after the house deal. Vivian physically stopped breathing correctly after reading them. No, Mom covered her mouth. Dad looked sick, and honestly, for the first time, nobody in the Crawford family could pretend I was stupid anymore. I looked directly at my father. You trusted Marcus because he made you feel successful. Then at Mom. You ignored every warning sign because Vivian looked perfect beside him. Finally, I looked at Vivian. And you spent years laughing at me while marrying someone who saw you as an investment. Nobody spoke. Because truth destroys rooms differently than yelling does. Quietly, completely. Then Dad whispered, what do we do now? I leaned back slowly. And for the first time in my entire life, every single person at that table waited for my answer. Nobody spoke for almost 10 full seconds. Dad stared at me. Mom looked terrified. Vivian sat frozen, clutching Marcus's affair messages with trembling hands. And honestly, I realized something strange in that moment. For the first time in my entire life, the Crawford family finally saw me as the smartest person in the room. Not because they respected me, because they were desperate. Interesting how quickly power shifts once people need saving. Dad cleared his throat roughly. What do we do? No authority anymore, no lectures, no dismissive tone, just fear. I folded my hands calmly. First, I said, you stop lying. Silence. I looked directly at my father. You tell the bank Marcus manipulated the loan. Then at Mom. You admit Grandma signed those documents while medicated. Mom's face tightened instantly. That could destroy us socially. There it was. Even now, appearance came before morality. I almost smiled. You're worried about gossip? You nearly lost Grandma's house. Vivian suddenly spoke through tears. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know, and honestly, for the first time I believed her. Vivian wasn't cruel the way my parents were. Weak, yes, spoiled, definitely, but Marcus chose her because she was easy to control. The same way my parents controlled her through praise. Dad rubbed both hands over his face. If the fraud investigation starts, the business could collapse. Interesting, still protecting the business, still protecting reputation, not one apology yet. Then finally, Mom looked at me carefully. Audrey, why are you helping us? That question hung in the room quietly. Because honestly, I asked myself the same thing all week. Why help people who spent years humiliating me? Then I thought about Grandma Grace sitting alone in that nursing home, and suddenly the answer became obvious. I'm not helping you, I answered softly. I'm protecting Grandma. Silence again, heavy silence. The kind that forces people to confront themselves. Then Dad whispered something I never expected to hear in my lifetime. We failed you. 3 words, late, incomplete, but real. I looked at him carefully and honestly. It didn't heal anything. Interesting how apologies lose power once survival no longer depends on receiving them. Mom started crying quietly. We thought you'd always be okay, she admitted. You never needed us the way Vivian did. That sentence explained my entire childhood. Not loved less, needed less. Families like mine reward weakness because independence threatens their control. I stood slowly and walked toward the dining room window. Outside, snow drifted softly across the driveway. Everything looked peaceful. Meanwhile, inside, the Crawford family was finally collapsing under the weight of years of truth. Then I turned back around calmly. There's something else you need to know, Dad frowned immediately. What? I pulled the crumpled lottery ticket from my purse slowly, the same ticket Mom handed me while 30 relatives laughed. The room went completely still. I checked the numbers. Mom stared blankly. Vivian frowned through tears. Dad's voice came out rough. And I smiled softly. It won. Nobody reacted at first because none of them understood what I meant. Then I quietly added $100 million. The room shattered. Mom physically grabbed the edge of the chair. Vivian covered her mouth. Dad looked genuinely dizzy. Interesting. I spent my entire life invisible to them. And suddenly, one sentence changed the way they looked at me forever. Not daughter, opportunity. Dad recovered first. Audrey, there it was, that tone. The same careful emotional tone people use right before asking for something enormous. I raised my hand immediately. No, silence. I already protected Grandma legally, I continued calmly. The house is safe. Mom blinked rapidly. You what? I challenged the deed transfer. The lawyers are handling everything. Dad stared at me speechlessly. For the first time in his life, he had completely lost control of the situation. And honestly, watching that terrified him more than losing money ever could. Then Vivian started crying harder, not performative crying anymore. Real grief. I was awful to you, she whispered. I looked at her quietly, because deep down that was all I ever wanted from anyone in this family, acknowledgement, truth. Then Mom suddenly whispered, You're not cutting us off, are you? Interesting question, because finally they understood consequences existed. I thought about every holiday, every dismissal, every cruel joke, every moment they made me feel small. Then I thought about Grandma's words, protect the truth, not your anger, so I answered honestly, I don't know yet. Dad lowered his head after that, and for once nobody argued, because the truth was obvious now. Relationships built on favoritism eventually collapse under pressure. Always. 3 months later, Marcus Pierce was arrested for financial fraud. Turns out my family wasn't his only target. Multiple lawsuits surfaced. Other victims came forward. Entire investment schemes collapsed. Vivian filed for divorce immediately. Dad's business survived barely. Mom stopped hosting massive family holidays, and Grandma Grace finally returned home safely. As for me, I bought a quiet lake house 3 hours away from the city, nothing extravagant, just peace. Funny enough, the first thing I planted there was a garden, burgundy dahlias, the same flowers my mother mocked at Thanksgiving. Because sometimes healing doesn't look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like growing beautiful things anyway. And honestly, that became my favorite form of revenge. Before you go, comment below. Would you forgive family after discovering they only respected you once money entered the picture? And if this story hit emotionally, subscribe for more powerful family drama stories, betrayal, manipulation, and satisfying endings from sad drama stories.